Hey everybody, it's the Stick Figure Historian, and we are back here this Friday for episode 13. Wait, Friday? Episode 13? Is that like Friday the 13th? Whoa. Spooky. Anyway, where was I going with that? Oh, right. So, last week we left Anne Hutchinson in the middle of a court trial, and the ministers from the church meeting back like a year ago just brought out evidence that she had called them unfit ministers of the New Testament, which is backing up the charge that was brought against her of slandering the ministers. Dirtbags. Did you say these men are not able ministers of the New Testament? The judge demanded of Anne. Yes, she replied, but they forced me into saying so, and I expected my words to be kept private. Had they not asked me, I would not have called them unfit. I was bound to tell the truth. The trial was ended for that day, set to resume the following morning. In the meantime, Anne was sternly told to consider the error of her ways. But Anne retreated not a step. Quite the contrary, she came back bolder than ever the next day. She demanded that the 6 traitor ministers take an oath of truthfulness. It's proper procedure in a court, by the way, that witnesses must swear an oath of truthfulness before giving their testimonies. And furthermore, she wanted them to admit that she had been reluctant to answer their questions at the private church meeting. The 6 ministers agreed to swear an oath, but only after her 3 defense witnesses had a chance to speak. John Cotton was one of these witnesses, and he did his best to help her. He was very careful to make Anne look as innocent as possible, and he was sure not to leave the traitor ministers untouched. You weren't at all upset or concerned on the day of the meeting when you heard Anne speak, he said to them. Why is it that you are so upset about it now? There was much hickering and dickering between him and the court officials, and things seemed to be getting nowhere. At last Anne spoke up again. She asked to have a chance to tell the court what she knew to be the truth. The room fell silent, and the eyes of her accusers fixed like wolves upon her. Standing straight and tall, as at the first, Anne told them firmly, You have no power over my body, neither can you do me any harm, for I am in the hands of the eternal Jehovah, my Savior. I am at his appointment. The bounds of my habitation are cast in heaven. No further do I esteem of any mortal man than creatures in his hand. I fear none but the great Jehovah, which hath foretold me of these things, and I do verily believe that he will deliver me out of your hands. Therefore take heed how you proceed against me, for I know that for this you go about to do to me, God will ruin you, and your posterity, and this whole state. In some ways, it was kinda a weird thing to say. Certainly it was very bold and brave, but it sealed her doom. There had been a suspicion for a while, amongst the Bay Colony leaders, that there was some kind of spiritualist fanatic driving this whole antinomian movement. So you see, not only had Anne spoken in outright defiance of them, but the prophetic nature of her statement immediately singled her out as the fanatical culprit they had been looking for. Governor Winthrop pointed Anne out as the principal cause of all our trouble, and asked the court to make a judgment against her. William Coddington, another friend of hers, stood up in protest. I do not see any clear witness against her, and you know it is a rule of the court that no man may be a judge and an accuser too. Here is no law of God that she hath broken, nor any law of the country that she broke, and therefore deserves no censure. but all was in vain. 3 of the traitor ministers finally swore the oath, and then repeated their evidence of her slandering. Anne, whom the court now called the heretic, an instrument of the devil, was banished. Wait, can we go back to that last picture? No, the one with the Bible. Yeah. You know, I kind of find it annoying that people in court are supposed to swear an oath on the Bible. I mean, the book itself tells us not to swear oaths. Sorry, just gotta mention that. Anyway, Anne's banished now. But as if the poor woman had not been through enough, she was not simply allowed to leave the colony. She was held prisoner for 4 whole months in a house 2 miles away from her own. Long and dreary were those winter months for Anne. Her husband and children came to see her as often as they could, but it wasn't very often, since it was so far away and the wintry weather made travel difficult. More often, her visitors were unwelcome ones. Shepherd and other ministers constantly came and tried to change her mind about what she believed. They tried to get her to admit that she had done wrong. They kept records of everything she said and used it against her. Slowly, bit by bit, they wore her down. Until, at last, another trial was held. A church trial this time, long and grueling. Her health and mind were so broken down after the long months in house prison and the minister's tricky questioning that her will began to bend a little. Even Cotton had turned against her now, working with the ministers to wear her out and change her mind. Only her son and son-in-law were at the trial to support her, but Cotton tried to make them be quiet. Anne eventually admitted that she had treated the ministers with contempt, that her outburst at the trial was wrong, and that she had believed many errors. But she wouldn't admit that she had believed many of those errors in the time before she was imprisoned. The church court, unsatisfied that she wouldn't completely bow to their will, voted to cast her out. "The Lord sanctify this unto you," said a haughty fellow to her as she passed him to walk out the door. "The Lord judgeth not as man judgeth," Anne replied. "Better to be cast out of the church than to deny Christ." The horrid ordeal was over. Anne was finally allowed to leave. She struck out south to Providence Plantations, where her husband and children were already waiting for her. The rest of the antinomians who stayed behind were punished and put down. Several were disenfranchised, meaning that they weren't allowed to vote in the colony, and their weapons were taken away from them. Winthrop's city on a hill was once again at peace.